Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us at Microsoft's inaugural Finance Reimagined conference. We're excited to begin this discussion where we'll cover a range of perspectives on how finance leaders and their respective organizations have responded to and recovered from difficult conditions over the past year, and how we're now reimagining the future of finance. In addition to the great sessions we'll be covering in this core note, we'll also have a variety of opportunities to engage with each other. While we can't connect in person yet, don't forget to connect with each other. You can quickly find and chat with others in the networking section, or create and join roundtables to deep dive into additional topics. I'm Corey Hernsrick, and I'll be your host today. I'm a finance director in the office of our CFO at Microsoft and lead our Modern Finance initiative, where I focus on driving innovation, capability building, and sharing best practices. So let's get going. Rebecca Henderson will get us started. As a renowned economist and professor at Harvard Business School, Rebecca helped create and teach the most popular course at HBS, and that work became the basis for her award-winning bestseller, Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire. Today, Rebecca is joining us to talk about reimagining capitalism and grappling with the future of work.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Henderson, and I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School. And I'm here to talk to you about a tiny topic, the changing nature of work, why it's a huge opportunity, why it's a huge threat, and what you can do about it in 20 minutes. So I'm going to move a little fast, but I hope I'll say something you find interesting. Let me start with the good news. The good news is the robots are coming, and it's not as scary as you think. AI, robotics, automated work, it's all moving more slowly than people expected. We're looking at 10 years, 15 years for the rollout of these kinds of technologies, so there is time. There's also enormous potential to use this time to increase productivity, drive growth, and create entirely new businesses. This is something that could remake your firm and your work. And all this could happen without driving mass unemployment. If we get the transition right. More than 60% of 2018 jobs had not been invented in 1940. We can start from scratch, build entirely new industries. There is no shortage of human need. So forget about the mass unemployment fear. This is just one example. There are no more medical transcriptionists. Instead, we have health information technicians. That's going to happen in industry after industry, in job after job. But there is bad news. The bad news is that taking advantage of these new technologies is going to be hard. It's going to require standardizing processes and procedures, never easy, investing in deep collaboration with the employees in your firm right across the organization, and really understanding the needs of your customers in depth, and sometimes is going to require fundamentally restructuring the nature of work and even the nature of your business. And by the way, these new technologies are going to put significant stress on our society. Because unless we retrain and retool, we will get an explosion of unemployment, and that's not going to be good for anyone. So, what can we do? We're facing what I call architectural innovation on a large scale. What does that mean? What it means is instead of just focusing on individual pieces of the problem, we now have to stand back and say, how does the whole business work? How does the whole flow of work work? And that's not an easy thing to do. Incremental or component innovation is relatively straightforward. If you think about a car, for example, you take an old car, that's the first Toyota Prius ever introduced on the left, and you make every little piece of it a bit better. It's a faster engine and a smoother ride and more comfortable seats and a leather-covered steering wheel, and yes, let's put some electronics in it. But the fundamental architecture of a car didn't change for 50 years. Now who knows what is next? Self-driving cars? Autonomous vehicles? We have no idea, really, what they're going to look like, who's going to drive them, how they're going to be controlled, how they're going to work, who's going to own them. The whole structure of the industry is up for grabs. That's architectural innovation. That's what these new technologies are likely to do to industry after industry. And that makes it super hard, because so many of us spend time in our little pieces of the problem. I'm a door handle engineer. You work on steering wheels. We don't really talk to each other. What these massive changes are going to do is mean that we have to step back and say, well, maybe the boundaries should be drawn differently. Maybe how we approach our customers should be different. Things are really going to have to change. This problem, architectural innovation, has been my personal obsession for my entire career. I have been studying change since I was in my early 20s, working as a McKinsey consultant in plants in Northern England that we were closing because 100-year-old firms couldn't seem to understand that the world was changing around them. It's so easy to get stuck in existing ways of doing things. We start as small entrepreneurial firms, but if we're successful, we go through takeoff, we become mature, things are going pretty well, everybody knows what they're doing. Yeah, there's disruption on the horizon, but it's someone else's job. This is the moment of danger. I spent 30 years studying this problem. I was the Eastman Kodak Professor of Management at MIT, which was a coincidence, but a rather disconcerting one if this is what you focus on. I've worked with firms like Cisco and Corning that have been able to transform themselves, and with firms like GM and Nokia. Do you remember Nokia? Right. Trying to persuade them that the world was changing. What have I learned? Well, I can put it all on a slide for you. All you need to do is be agile, experiment, run autonomous teams, have a bias for action, embrace failure, and be ready to disrupt yourself. No problem, right? This is the part I love. I'm the academic. I put it on the screen. We're set. But of course, this list, while it's the right list, is enormously hard. It's hard because when you face this kind of change, it's all too easy to say, it's not happening, or it'll happen later, or somebody else can deal with it. And okay, if it is happening, we won't make any money. Yes, this is like someone should do it, but I don't see the business case. We're doing fine right now. And last but not least, okay, maybe it is happening. Maybe we need to adopt it to make money, but we can't get it done. Do you know how busy we are? Do you know what's going on around here? And you want me to do what? At the same time, with fewer resources? That's what it's like. I'm here to tell you that in 30 years of working with firms trying to change, I've heard these questions 1,000 times. So, let me be a little more precise about how to get this done. It's all about learning to do two things at once. About learning to exploit, that is, do what you're doing right now and you're doing pretty well, but also explore. Try out new policies and procedures. Put some of the new technologies in at the edge of the business and see how it works. Maybe take one division and experiment. Explore. And you have to do both at once. For reasons I don't think we still understand, that's hard in any organization. The exploiters, the people who give you the numbers, who can give you the quarterly numbers, they're operators, they know how to make things work. They seem to have fundamentally different temperaments from the explorers. The people who are like, whoa, this is really cool. Let's give it a try. Let's see what works. The people who are keeping the lights on in the existing business, the exploiters, they're like, you're doing what? With my money? Well, I'm not sure how I feel about that. And explorers are terrible at making their deadlines and behaving like, regular corporate people. So what you're faced with is the challenge of ambidexterity. You have to be able to both exploit the core of the existing business and explore to discover the new ways of doing things. That's the challenge. It's hard. It's sometimes tempting to think it's almost impossible and to get angry with the people around you, but don't do it. I was once working with a CEO who pulled his top 400 people into a room. He was in the middle of a massive transformation and it wasn't going well. And he stood up in front of the people and he said, I've been thinking about the problems we've been having and I've worked out what's going on. It's you. You're stupid. He actually used the word stupid. Do not do that. It can be very frustrating. If you're a change maker and if you're attending this conference, my guess is you are, it can be very frustrating to be in an organization that doesn't seem to be listening and that's moving too slowly. But that's the way of the world. Organizations get very, very good at playing tennis. Everything gets structured on playing tennis. And you come along and you say, well, let's play golf. It's just hitting a little ball with a stick. I mean, what's so different? But playing tennis, you've built up the muscle memory, you've watched all the videos. This is something very different. 3 ideas as to what might help. These are the 3 ideas that seem to make a difference. Get unstuck. What's that about? That's about getting less busy. Build purpose. And I know you think I'm going to go all wobbly and romantic on you, but I promise I'm not. And, oh yes, by the way, we need to reimagine capitalism. So, what do I mean? What is getting unstuck? Is this your project pipeline? Do you have far too many projects? I worked with a firm that I'll call Prequip, not its real name, and we mapped for them every project this firm had underway. So you'll see here 1 to 30, 30 projects. What were the resources required to get those projects done? What were the months that we needed it finished? And what did that imply for the people who needed to work on it? How many months of person work did each project need? And then you add all other support activity, you add up total development requirements, and for Prequip, they got that they needed this year 2,783 person months. What did they have? They had 960. They were 300% overloaded. I promise you I'm not exaggerating. I've worked with firms that are 500% overloaded. Well, what's going on? What's going on is everybody kind of knows that Project 26 isn't going to get done. The trouble is, you haven't told the people running Project 26. They're trying to get it done. I once had the pleasure of attending a strategy meeting for one of the world's largest consumer goods companies. It was a big room. There were maybe 40 of us sitting around a table. It was all the senior management of the company. It's the kind of thing that gives a business professor like me goosebumps, right? You're in the room. And they were going to make decisions about what they were doing this year. So the first person stood up and said, I think we should expand into South America. And they showed the product they wanted to do and the storyboards, and everyone said, yes, fantastic idea. Second person stood up and said, I think we really need to do our IT systems on the East Coast. And they had the budget and the means to do it, and everyone said, fantastic idea. Third person stood up and said, I think we should put in swings and play a swing set outside the corporate headquarters to really build our relationship with the community. They said, great. It went on like this all day, from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 at night without a break. When the CEO asked me at the end if I had any suggestions, I said breaks. Breaks would have been good. No breaks. They said yes to every single project. I asked the CEO, was there a secret meeting where you got rid of all the duds and now this is just kind of something ceremonial? He said, no. I said, you cannot do it. If you are waiting for bad projects to show up so you can't do them, forget it. The people who work for you are really good. They will bring you too much work. The only way to innovate significantly is to pull back on the workload. Because when people are overloaded, their productivity drops dramatically, their stress rises, and their tendency to revert to what you would call learned behavior goes right up. Everybody starts reacting from their lizard brain. There is no space to do new things. So you've got to get unstuck. That is hard. I put what I think I know about it on this slide. I nearly wrote an entire book about this problem. It was going to be called Stuck, but of course I was too busy to get it finished. But you got to manage capacity, people's capacity, just as you would your plant capacity. You have to learn to kill projects when projects are good. You have to have a clear strategy and live by it. And you need to change your habits around problems. That's actually a big topic. But when someone shows up and says they're having trouble, rather than taking their head off, you have to talk about why and fix the underlying issues. It's often overload. 2 more ideas, and I have 1 minute, so I'm going to be very brief. Building purpose. It's such a fashionable idea, but it's fashionable for a reason. We are increasingly clear as academics that having a shared mission that is authentic and deeply rooted in the personal values of everyone in the firm can drive innovation and creativity in ways that are not incremental, but transformative. If you can build shared vision, a real sense of meaning, and a strong sense of identity, that gives you alignment, intrinsic motivation, and trust. And oh my goodness, are those correlated with performance. So in this slide, I'm summarizing a recent paper I wrote that summarizes not 10 years of my research, but 10 years of academic research. We have hundreds of papers in this area, suggesting that managing in what I call a high commitment way, with dignity and respect, with a goal that people can embrace and engage with, can not increase your performance by 1 or 2%, but by 30 or 40 or 50%. All you have to do is be clear about your values, live by them. Whoa! What did I say? I mean it. This is hard. The reason purpose is correct, people often say to me, if purpose is such a great thing, how come nobody has them? Or so few people have it? It's hard. You've got to live by your values. You've got to be willing to invest real resources. You've got to do the emotional work of following through on what you said you would do. The good news is, if you can do this, it's really fun. It's much harder work. You have to be more engaged. But the firms I've worked with that manage like this, whoa, like night and day. It is a different way of working, and it gives you the base of trust and commitment and respect that is what drives innovation. I got interested in purpose because I was working with all these firms that were failing, and so I went off to look for firms that were succeeding. And yes, they had strategies and they were allocating their resources and they were doing all the things you think, but what were they really doing? They had a shared purpose. They were trying to change for a reason other than just making money. I'll close on one idea, which is far too short. I'm not even going to say anything. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm going to say if, as a society, we are to make sure that these new technologies, robotics, AI, digitization, if they are to bring prosperity to all of us, I think we need to rethink our society. I think we need to reimagine capitalism. I believe capitalism is the best system people have invented, an unparalleled source of freedom and prosperity. But we have issues. You know what they are. We have accelerating inequality. We have an environmental crisis out of control. We have accelerating polarization. I think business can play an enormous role in addressing those problems, and in doing so, grow and thrive. And this is a shameless plug. I've written a book about it. But the book lays out in 5 easy steps how we can build a society and a private sector that's more in balance. One in which AI is a source of rejoicing that augments human productivity, not a threat that people want to smash. And my guess is that's going to be pretty important going forward. Thank you very much. In summary, change is hard, but you can get unstuck, be purpose-driven, and in your spare time, reimagine capitalism. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's great to get a reminder on the systemic impact organizations can have and the underlying implications for our finance departments and our roles as finance leaders. Your emphasis on building purpose particularly resonates with us at Microsoft, as we often focus on our mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. With this in mind, I want to jump to the next couple one-on-one conversations to see how this last year has impacted some organizations and how they're leveraging learnings to transform for the better moving forward. First, I'm going to connect with Ritesh Tiwari from Unilever, and next I'll speak with Mark Fowler from AstraZeneca. So we're really pleased today to be joined by Ritesh Tiwari from Unilever. Ritesh currently heads performance management for Unilever and is the CFO of the international business, but soon will be moving to India as their executive director of finance and the CFO for Hindustan Unilever Limited. Ritesh, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. So, Ritesh, I know at Unilever you are a multinational company. You are focused in many different markets, and COVID probably impacted you differently even than many companies who may be focused in one particular market. Can you share a little bit about some of those challenges that you faced in the early days of COVID-19?
Thanks, Corey, for having me here. As Unilever, we operate in 190 countries across the world. So we saw the impact of pandemic very early in the few markets, which of course then started to spread in more different parts of the world. We were able to learn how we were able to respond to those set of markets, and those learnings were very valuable to us as we started to navigate the reality of pandemic in different other parts of the world.
And it's really interesting to hear you say that. You are clearly on the forefront of trying to help many people, millions of people around the world, respond to the pandemic in their own unique ways and support their families. So thank you for everything that you're doing. So can you talk a little bit, Ritesh, about where your finance organization was, how you were positioned when COVID-19 hit from a digital transformation perspective?
Resilience is inbuilt and absolutely intrinsic to Unilever. As finance function in last few years, we have invested a lot on finance talent and on our digital capabilities. That really proved extremely pivotal in our response to pandemic.
Wonderful. And what was your experience like in maintaining the productivity of your employees a year ago as you went to remote close, and how did you do collaboration?
In my mind, there are 2 different kinds of response we need to have to this pandemic. Our first response was a response to crisis. How do we manage the demand supply crisis and continue to operate and serve our consumers and customers across the world? At the same time, we have to start to think as to how do we respond to opportunities very differently, which are coming up in such times which are very difficult for all of us. Personally, for me, the challenge of leadership has been immense. We all need to learn, we all had to learn, how do we make a shift of leading from a podium to leading behind a screen? In times like this, we had to really balance our optimism for opportunity with a practical aspect of responding to the needs of the people and recognizing the individual circumstances behind which people are living and working long hours behind a screen in restricted conditions.
I appreciate that perspective of empowering your people. We focus on that a lot here at Microsoft as well. I'd be curious to get your perspective on the logistics. How do you actually ensure that your people can be productive and that they can continue to collaborate?
I think one of the big advantage has been for us the kind of tools and technology that we have available to ourselves at work. Plus, where needed, we were able to help our colleagues across the world with the infrastructure which you would need to be able to operate to work from home. That really made a big difference in terms of making people comfortable. And ultimately, the way we were sensitive to individual needs and individual circumstances was really pivotal for us to make people comfortable in such situations. The way we were able to drive rhythm and make very sharp choices across times like this, to me, was a differentiator. When we were faced with crisis, challenge, and complexity, we had to respond with simplicity and clarity. To me, that helped people to be able to focus in what they need to deliver on the day, on the week, on the month. And that sharpness of communication of what is expected was helpful to people. So I would say it was a mix of all three elements, some physical help or in terms of infrastructure, providing simplicity and clarity of getting the job done, but equally being very heightened sensitive to individual circumstances of people. To me, put together all those three things, Corey, put together really added up and made the difference. And we really managed to maintain productivity in spite of the challenges that we've been facing.
That's remarkable. So great to hear such a success story. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of where you are now? What are you doing differently in your finance organization to add value and maximize that impact that you will carry on moving forward?
Yes, as we were faced with the pandemic and we are very much into it, hopefully soon world becomes a more healthier place. But there are a few things we did, which in my view, it has worked, and we would continue doing that. One of the first things we did was simplify our performance management framework as finance. No longer we could have annual targets or annual resource allocation to drive the business. We had to make them into smaller buckets and chunks of quarter. Our resource allocation had to be far more dynamic across geography and across categories, because we've seen different geographies responding very differently to pandemic. Different governments had very different level of stimulus they were able to provide to the people, and hence consumption has changed. Equally, the kind of things that people are consuming has changed big time. No longer people are going to parks to have ice cream, which means we have to then serve ice cream in home very differently to our consumers. So in times like this, the finance function had to really come up to the party to ensure that we are able to develop that reflex muscle of being able to get the right resource allocation done. That was one key element that we ended up deploying as part of that. Second thing, it was very important for us to look at this opportunity from multiple dimensions, because the response that we had as a function was very different. Our first response was towards the challenge and pandemic, and how do we manage the crisis? As we started to do that well, and we started to get comfortable living and operating a business in this time, we had to then do a second set of response. How do you respond to the new opportunities? Then that started becoming an equally important element for us to focus upon. Between the two set of responses, we decided that the only way to do that is to have a more comprehensive scenarios getting created. This was one of the elements that our board and our leadership team requested the finance function to lead, is to make different scenarios that if at all we have to thrive in this pandemic, we have to ensure that we run a very successful business in the face of recession. What would those multiple scenario responses would look like? That really helped us to make our own choices of portfolio, our choices of resource allocation, and then trying to maximize the opportunity which is still present in such difficult times.
And do you think, Ritesh, that some of these things will stick? Are some of these things change now for good?
In my mind, across supply chain, across consumers, across our partners, and people at large, the adoption of technology has really changed to a very different scale. In my mind, those things going forward becomes a very different way of operating the business. We will be able to leverage technology much more than we were able to do it because the ecosystem around us is far more amenable to technology deployment. But certain things are not changing. The way we've seen heightened consumer awareness for purpose and sustainability, those core values have only got further accentuated in times like this. So it is great to see that those value systems that we have as Unilever in our business, we will be able to continue driving those. But equally, the opportunity of running the business in a much more receptive ecosystem of digital will make us a far more digitally savvy business.
And can you talk a little bit more about that? And you mentioned technology earlier. So how is technology playing a role as you reimagine some of these processes?
One of the things, Corey, that we have seen is the where consumers buy today and the role of e-commerce. So when we look at different channels of sales, e-commerce across all markets has really dialed up its presence. So hence digitizing our front end is one of the top priorities for us. And how do we really maximize our capabilities in the front end channel is really important to us. So in times like this, those are the key elements which are going to really become more important to us to dial value going forward.
Great. And speaking of going forward, and as you look ahead, what excites you the most? What's next for Unilever Finance?
No, I think the journey that we have had of our own digital transformation, we've seen the value of that in such difficult times. It has only made us more resolved to continue being ahead of the curve and to ensure that we continue to invest behind those technologies in every element. There was a time in the past where we had looked at technology and digital capability from the perspective of driving efficiency in the organization. Now a pretty big change has happened that no longer you want to invest and drive those possibilities for efficiency, but you want to drive those possibilities and capabilities for driving growth, for leveraging opportunities. And that's the lens and framework that we have. So as I look into future, it really excites me. How can we really open up and leverage the ecosystem, which is far more recipient to technology and digital well-being? How can we use that to run our business model differently? Certain things we have learned in times like this, that how can we run our business in a very different way when people are working from home? In my mind, hopefully when the health situation across the world improves, certain of those things will continue to remain. We will continue to work more agile, more flexible, and more distributed. In my mind, it opens up the kind of talent we will be able to attract, retain. The kind of talent we'll be able to deploy to solve a problem in one part of the world. It'll be much easier for us to draw talent from a different part of the world and make those virtual squads to address those problems. Now, these things we have learned in the pandemic. How do you really get squad across different part of the world to look into a problem and solve? How are we able to learn from each other? That learning capability across borders has really become very, very sharp and high. Because now there is no more borders across the world. There's one screen all of us can share across the world and work together. So as I look into future, learning from each other, number one. Number two, heightened use of digital, not only for driving efficiency, but also for driving growth and opportunity. And our ability to tap and use our resources and talent across the world much more efficiently are the things that really inspires me. And end of the day, I think this pandemic has also made far more sensitive leaders out of all of us. That is one trait in my mind I don't want to give up. I want to ensure that all of us, myself to start with, we continue to remain sensitive to individual needs and requirements of the business and what it would take to get best out of the talent at work.
That's so inspiring, Ritesh. Thank you for sharing that perspective. So, Ritesh, let me ask you one more set of questions about how you are thinking about bringing your employees back to work someday. What kind of criteria are you evaluating right now? And does your team see any implications of the new way that work will be done at Unilever?
One of the elements we are very cautious abundantly is safety and well-being of people. We will really be very careful in sensing the atmosphere as to when it is safe for people to come back to office. Do we end up seeing that post-pandemic, we will go back to 7 days a week, 9 to 5, working in office behind the desk? I don't think so. The habits have evolved and we have realized how one can be equally efficient while working agile and while working flexible. Some of these principles we have had implemented in Unilever, and it has been part of our culture for quite some time, for many years. I think we will have a much greater resolve and commitment to continue doing this and more going forward. So will we come back to office? Surely. Will we come back to office 5 days a week? I don't think so. Will we come back to office 9 to 5? I don't think so. So those virtues of flexibility and agility, in my view, will continue. And it's all in a positive way because it will continue to bring more amount of productivity going forward as well for us.
Ritesh, thank you so much for sharing your perspective.
Thanks so much for having me here.
I'm now joined by Mark Fowler, a director of data analytics and automation for AstraZeneca. Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you're on truly the front lines of battling this pandemic for us, and we all thank you for your efforts.
That's good to be here, Corey. Thank you.
So, Mark, can you give us an understanding of what the initial challenge your organization faced as COVID reared its head a year ago?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a couple of ways to answer that. There's the way in which our company will be seen from the outside as having a role to play within to tackle the COVID challenge, and that being on the vaccine front, which is really significant for us as a company, going from a cold start to a globally scaled vaccine product. And that has put some pressure on the finance function to be able to partner and support the business through that really significant change in our business model. So that's one thing. But I guess from my side personally, a lot of the work that me and my team have been doing within finance has been to drive techniques to automate processes and techniques to analyze data in a more automated way and to extract new insights from it. On the process automation side, I think something that most finance functions will relate to is that where we had automated processes in place, the COVID impact led to pretty much no disruption, and it led to a really positive view of the automations that were in place. And the sort of follow on from that, I suppose, is within the finance function at AstraZeneca, you now see people starting to think automation first, as opposed to how and where can we automate. And that automation first approach to make the connection has been really important as we've thought about standing up new processes to support the vaccine. So there's a kind of a nice connection in there that we've seen within the AstraZeneca finance function.
So, Mark, it seems like you really had already begun your transformation journey, which helped you accelerate your ability to respond. Can you give us an understanding of when that journey started for you and what you did actually to leverage some of those learnings that you'd had?
Sure, yeah, it has been a bit of a journey, and probably for us started 3 years ago in finance, where we started to experiment with process automation techniques, largely in our back office finance operations, and met with some success in terms of deploying automations that really release capacity and enhance the quality of the manual processes that were being operated, the robustness and the agility and the scalability of those processes. And over time, that's grown to be deployment of task automation solutions into broader workflow process automation solutions, which have increased in scale and in value. But it's been something of a journey and lots of missteps along the way. But yeah, started about 3 years ago.
That's great. So you had a good 2-year jump on the pandemic, which sounds like it.
Well, yeah, yes, but I guess what's really encouraging is that acceleration of the mindset to really start to engage much harder with automation techniques to drive more automation into the processes that we operate within finance.
Yeah. And switching gears just a little bit, so when COVID hit a year ago, what was that first step like when you wanted to maintain productivity and collaboration among your employees?
Yeah, the thing I remember from that point of lockdown, of global lockdown, was a lot of our automation workshops ran by way of physical workshops. So we'd actually go out to parts of our business, run ideation sessions, run process exploration sessions to come out with opportunities to drive value through automation. And the immediate thought of we can't travel made me look at the forward-looking calendar with all the workshops that we got lined up and gulp. But yeah, common to most of our finance, well, all of our finance function, as far as I can see, that jump to virtual ways of working was really quick. You know, the ways in which people adapted to use online collaboration tools, of which there are many, but you know, working in live PowerPoints, live Excels was something certainly I hadn't done before COVID. But this was something that people seem to adapt to super quick. And actually, we had a small kind of hiatus around the point of lockdown where things did slow down a little bit, but actually across the full year, we didn't miss a target in terms of the workshops and the value targets that we'd set ourselves at the beginning of the year. So it really spoke to the way in which the teams adapted and really took on these virtual ways of working, almost without a heartbeat, really. And as we exited the year and as we contemplate another few months for sure in lockdown, I'm not sure how much we'll go back to the physical processes that we used to operate. Actually, I think we are becoming more efficient through the virtual ways of working.
That's great to hear. Actually, can you talk a little bit more about that? How do you see kind of the new way of working, the new normal, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think AstraZeneca is in a good relationship with Microsoft on Teams, and we've sort of been taking beta releases as new functionality has been added into that application, and yeah, we've really embraced it. So the ways of running a workshop using that tool as a means of collaborating are pretty much embedded now after almost a full year now of working in that way. So yeah, I just don't see us going back to losing all that time jumping on a plane and spending the money and creating the carbon footprint that goes with the physical workshops. And actually, in some cases, the ways in which we collaborate are much more effective than the old sticky note on a whiteboard technique that we would have used in the past. More recordable, more capable of lending themselves to more post hoc analysis, easier to maintain, easier for everybody to contribute within the session. So overall, more effective, I think, versus the way we used to do things pre-March last year.
That's great. And beyond kind of that collaboration, what are kind of the processes or tasks that maybe the entire finance org will change for good?
I really hold out the hope that when we look back in 12 months' time on the vaccine and how the finance function have supported this huge global scale-up to deliver vaccines globally, that it will be heavily supported by automated processes as opposed to a scale-up of human resources to support it. A little bit closer to my world in analytics, where we'd be developing predictive models. One big challenge that COVID brought was that our predictive models that we were running simply couldn't predict the impact of what was a black swan event. And I'm not sure that we necessarily have learned that we will be able to cater for that sort of event in the future. I think what we have been going through, though, is a bit of a learning journey to say that there might be new data sets that might help us predict the recovery. And that's really interesting for me. Thinking about how an agile predictive modeling team can operate, that's really exciting for me. So as I look forward to how the shape of our business might change as we become more patient-centric, we need to work with a lot more patient data. That bringing those new data sets together with a predictive modeling capability is something that really excites me and feels like a big opportunity for the finance function going forward.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And you've mentioned now a few times, you've mentioned the collaboration tools, you've mentioned some of these automation tools. Can you speak kind of broadly about what is the role of technology then in all of this work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, I very much think about it on a process and decision-making lens. So two of the key things that finance do to support the business are operate processes, some very large-scale ones, large P2P, C2C type processes, and also partner with the business to help make really good decisions. And the automation kind of focuses on the process side of things. So can we make processes super efficient, super effective, scalable, responsive, compliant? And I think automation has a huge role to play in all of those objectives. And not to miss probably one of the most important points, but is really customer centric. So those processes are really catering for the specific customers that interact with those processes. And in that realm, then I think automation has a huge role to play. And then on the decision making side of things, using technology to work with much bigger data sets than the finance function of 10 years ago might have worked with in an Excel spreadsheet is really one of the key roles that I see going forward in terms of being able to use technology to analyze large data sets to support better decision making. So to drive towards more data-driven decisions is probably an area where technology has a huge role to play as we look forward. And in a world where we expect the available data that may be leveraged to support a decision is going to increase, over time.
Yeah, it's exciting to hear that. And certainly AstraZeneca seems well positioned for not only recovering from the pandemic, but reimagining the future. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're most excited about as you look to the future of your function?
Yeah, I think it's the mindset change that I can see happening. We had a big finance transformation project internally that concentrated very much on building a one source of truth from a data architecture point of view. And what I can see now in our company, in our finance function, is people really engaging with the potential of that data, which today could be exploited a lot more. And as we go forward and we think about new data sources, the opportunities to bring those new data sources together with our existing harmonized data sets opens up a whole lot of opportunity, I think, to improve, as I said earlier, data-driven decision making. And I think that as an opportunity for our finance function and probably embedded within our finance refresh strategy is the real opportunity for us as we look forward.
Great. Let's change gears just a little bit and think about, coming out of this pandemic, which hopefully, as you said, the vaccine is ready and rolled out effectively over the next few months, and we're all returning back to some semblance of normalcy. What do you think, that looks like from your finance perspective, for example? Do you bring folks back to the office? Or do you have a distributed workforce, a hybrid model? Can you share any insights that you've had?
Yeah, it's certainly been a hot topic of debate. As a company, I guess we've sort of taken the view that making a decision on that policy in the middle of the lockdown probably isn't the right time to nail some colours to the mast and to start to and to think appropriately about the different situations where working together in a physical environment really does add value. And there are undoubtedly some big advantages of working together in physical spaces versus continuing to work in a virtual arrangement, which also can have its benefits. So it's a tough one to answer actually right now. I'm really not sure on how as a company we'll draw that line. And certainly it's something that we've surveyed the entire workforce internally on, and there's a big range of preferences. Some at the extreme end of I'm desperate to get back into the office and to actually speak to someone, through to the complete other end of the scale, which is I really value working online and having the flexibility to work online. So somehow we're going to have to find the right balance as we move forward. But I don't see a crystal clear, easy answer to that question straight away.
No, and I don't think anyone does yet. But hopefully, I think we're all sharing some of these ideas so that we can inspire each other, and appreciate your response there. Mark, as we come to a close, what words of advice would you share with another organization that may be just embarking on their journey?
Yeah, it's certainly been a very fulfilling, exciting, interesting period of work focusing on deploying automation techniques and developing advanced analytic capability. I think probably if I were reflecting where I made missteps and therefore some advice to share would probably be always try to make sure when innovating and trialing out new techniques and technology to ensure the work that you're doing to explore it is connected very definitely to a problem statement and a value of that solution in use. So that would be one thing. And then the other would be, as I did more and more work in this area and got more used to agile ways of working and that whole concept, I would also encourage you to think about, often you hear the analogy of the skateboard, the bicycle, building up to motorbike and then a car. So in those innovative areas, I would really endorse that approach. Look for some call it minimum viable. I've heard it called minimum lovable product lately, but focus on that first iteration, that first experiment that can really deliver some value that you've already defined can be used in anger in the business, and probably those would be the two key messages that I would call out. So probably not technology related, more mindset about how you explore these new technologies and new techniques.
Mark, thank you again for your time today. Thank you for sharing your perspective with us. It's inspiring to be able to learn from somebody like you who's well on your way and already making steps to respond, recover, and even reimagine the future. And we wish you and AstraZeneca all the best as you continue to respond to the pandemic. Thanks again, Ritesh and Mark. It's so great to hear about the work your organizations are doing, and I'm excited to see how you can continue to adjust moving forward. While these have been a couple great examples, I'm sure there are many other great examples from those attending or viewing today. Don't forget to use the networking section to connect with and learn more from each other directly. With that said, we want to give another specific example focused on addressing needs around employee engagement. From Rebecca's presentation on grappling with the future of work to my conversations with Mark and Ritesh, we're seeing that our roles are changing and engaging our employees is playing an increasingly important role. Let's listen in as Anu Chawla from Microsoft shares a quantitative approach for understanding and reacting to employee engagement.
Hi, my name is Anu Chawla, and I'm a program manager on the Viva Insights team at Microsoft. In this session, we'll cover how you can enable your business to become and stay resilient with Microsoft Viva Insights. Viva is a platform that empowers people and teams to be their best, bringing together communications, insight, knowledge, and learning within the flow of everyday work and collaboration in Microsoft 365. Viva builds on the foundation of Microsoft 365 by adding innovative new services and insights focused on people development and success. These areas have always been important, but now they're vital. The world is different now, and the way we work is transforming with it. As our CEO, Satya Nadella, said last April, we saw 2 years' worth of digital transformation occur in 2 months, and it hasn't slowed down. All of us have scrambled to keep business running in response to sudden disruption, and we've achieved a lot. But there was a cost to that agility and that responsiveness, leaving employees depleted of energy, mentally distanced, and less productive. Employee burnout has been on a troublesome trajectory for several years, with the World Health Organization recognizing it as an occupational phenomenon in May 2019. 34% of workers feel more burnt out than they did a year ago. 76% of workers currently suffer from burnout, and 91% of workers report negative impact on performance. That's the toll it took on our people. And here's what it did to our businesses. We saw 2/5 of the day become unproductive, 1/3 of salary lost to disengagement, and the cost of replacing an employee average at about twice their salary. As we reimagine our businesses going into the future, we can do more. We want to shift the mindset that employee well-being is somehow at odds with productivity and challenge leaders to reimagine well-being as a catalyst for their businesses. Because the upside is huge. With greater profitability, twice the innovation, higher customer satisfaction, and 10% higher return on equity, we can create a culture where people and businesses thrive. The Viva Suite has insights for individuals, managers, and leaders. Today we'll focus on insights for business leaders like you, and then we'll walk through solutions specifically tailored to business resilience. From measuring how your business is responding to the disruption, to tapping into your data to craft an optimal return to work strategy. Let's dive in. This is the Viva Insights homepage in Microsoft Teams. At the top, you'll see tabs for Stay Connected and Protect Time. These are where individuals will find their personalized insights. The Team tab is where managers will find insights about their teams. As a leader, you'll get all of these tabs, as well as an additional tab for your organization. Clicking in, we'll come to this outcome page. On the left-hand navigation pane, you'll see the 9 outcomes available. Today, we'll go through just one, though there are several more to explore around topics such as employee engagement, organizational agility, manager effectiveness, and increased sales and customer focus. This is the Enhance Organizational Resiliency outcome. The white card is for the first behavior that informs this outcome: improve team cohesion. On the left-hand side of the card, we see a main metric. In this case, 67% of teams have strong cohesion. To the right of that, we'll see a supporting data visualization. Here we're seeing a chart of the organization, visualizing how those teams interact and showing which teams have strong cohesion. To the right of that, we have the Take Action section, which offers leaders best practices curated by domain experts. Clicking those best practices will launch a flyout with suggestions for changing work culture, as well as ways to leverage the tools leaders already have within the Microsoft 365 suite. Scrolling down, we come to the next behavior in this outcome: protect employee well-being. Here we see that 52%, more than half, of employees are working after hours for more than an hour each week. To the right, we can see that breakdown and see what that after-hour collaboration looks like for various percentiles in the organization. Since we know that high after-hours collaboration leads to burnout, which accounts for 20 to 50% of companies' annual turnover, this may be something I want to keep an eye on. It may also be an indicator of inefficient processes that could be optimized, or workloads that need to be rebalanced. Here again, I can leverage a few best practices to help address this challenge. There is a customized flyout for each behavior in each of the 9 outcomes. Next in this outcome is the behavior Accelerate Decision-Making. Here we can see what proportion of managers spend the majority of their meeting time in double-booked meetings. Because double-booked and redundant meetings have downstream impacts that slow decision-making and waste meeting preparation time, this insight is an indicator of potential bottlenecks in decision-making, particularly because managers often operate at or over capacity, and over the last several months, this has only intensified. That wraps up the Enhanced Organizational Resiliency outcome for business leaders in the Viva Insights app in Microsoft Teams. Let's explore the tailored experiences for leaders to understand how their organizations are responding to disruption and plan their employees' return to work sites. This is the Business Continuity Dashboard. On the left, we can see a graph of the organization's collaboration, broken down by the mode of communication. Here we can look for changes in the way that employees are communicating, as well as spikes in the overall time spent in collaboration. On the right, we can see that breakdown by specific department. We can also look at collaboration after hours, highlighting departments with increases and decreases in overall after-hours work. On the right, you'll see a chart of average collaboration by time of day over the period of 24 hours. Here we can see changes in when collaboration is occurring, looking for lengthened workdays or higher peaks during the day. And we know that employees' relationships with their managers directly correlate to their engagement, job satisfaction, and retention. On the left, we can see that 20% of employees had no manager one-on-one time in the last 2 weeks. And below, we can see a breakdown by department. On the right, we can see how employees are engaging with each other, as strong peer relationships help employees stay connected to their teams. This is a small sample of how we can measure employees' adjustment in a time of disruption. But we also know that leaders have a lot to contend with when it comes to the topic of returning employees to their physical work sites. We know there are a lot of preparations, decisions, and logistics associated with returning employees to work. From declaring the return, to communicating it, to making sure the site is ready and safe. With the Return to Work Sites dashboard, Viva Insights, powered by Workplace Analytics, can help leaders use data to decide more objectively and optimally who returns, and where, and when. Here we can see a breakdown by department of collaboration, with on-site collaborators versus off-site collaborators, helping leaders understand which departments would most benefit from being together on-site. You can decide whether to phase in department by department or start with a proportion of each department, and it's all laid out by your physical buildings on campus. More complex scenarios can be explored for who should return first, differentiating insular collaborators versus cross-functional collaborators versus high and low on-site collaborators, each with their own recommended return to work site strategy. Alternate day staffing schedules can be generated to help decide when employees should return, as well as seating charts to determine where they should physically return. Finally, plans for shared spaces that support on-site safety protocols help decide how employees should return. Viva Insights was built with privacy in mind within the trusted Microsoft 365 ecosystem. You can control and audit your data. Insights feature de-identified data for organizations, and insights for individuals are private and personal. We support GDPR requirements. Trusted around the world, we've partnered with preeminent institutions on research, and with our customers, leading the way to achieve cultural transformation with Viva Insights. Today, we've covered some of the organizational insights available to leaders within the Viva suite, including experiences to help build and maintain business resilience. There's plenty more to discover for leaders, as well as products curated for the manager and for individuals. To learn more about what we covered today, as well as the full breadth of insights and tools available, ask your account executive about an insights discovery workshop. And you can always visit our website at aka.ms/productivity and wellbeing. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Anu. I think we've all seen or can relate to the burnout from this last year, and it's incredible to see how we can use data-driven insights to help improve productivity and well-being across our orgs. We'd love to hear more from all of you about how you continue to optimize your workforce productivity. Take a look at the roundtables or feel free to create your own to have deeper conversations on this topic or any of your choosing. Let's now shift gears a bit and focus on how companies pivoted operations to recover from the unprecedented shock of this pandemic. I'm excited to hand it over to Miles Corson and Tony Klimas from Ernst & Young.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Finance Agenda. How do you transform at speed to build value that lasts? I'm Miles Corson, a partner with EY based in New York, and I'm delighted today to be joined by my colleague Tony Klimas. Tony, welcome.
Thanks, Miles. It's really great to be here with you.
We're going to be sharing some results from our recent DNA of the CFO survey, a global survey that looks at the changing role of the CFO. We first conducted this survey back in 2010 and have conducted it intermittently, with 2020 being the latest version. The survey was conducted in late March and April of 2020 in the immediate aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. We surveyed over 800 senior finance leaders from across the globe, reflecting broad sector representation, and most of the organizations surveyed had revenue over $1 billion, with over 30% having revenues in excess of $5 billion. So Tony, perhaps I could ask you to share some of the feedback on the changing role of the CFO.
Yeah, thanks, Miles. And so hello, everyone. My name is Tony Klimas. I'm a partner in our business consulting practice, and I'm focused on the finance function. And along with Miles, I'm one of the co-authors of this DNA of the CFO study. Today, we're going to talk about three themes that emerged from the study. We're going to just share some of the highlights and some of the things that we thought were interesting. And then, of course, we'll get you access to the full study if you want to go and check that out for yourself. But the first theme, as Miles mentioned, is really around the complex role of the CFO and the challenges they face in collaborating across the C-suite. So I think at this point in time, every CFO and every senior finance executive talked to realizes how important collaboration across the C-suite is. So 82% of them acknowledge that they really can't succeed without having a trusted and collaborative relationship with the other members of the C-suite. As we've done this study over the years, we've noticed there are certain areas where we have actually lots of progress. And in fact, when it comes to IT and operations, there's a high degree of collaboration that's already existing today. And we saw strong majorities of people in our survey response reporting that they had good interaction and collaboration, both with the chief operating officer and with the CIO. But interestingly, when it comes to HR and the customer function, we didn't really see that same level of collaboration. In fact, these are the two areas where we saw a lot of opportunity for improvement. And in fact, just around half, and even a little bit less than half of our respondents talked about having a close collaborative relationship with HR and the customer or marketing function. And when you think about how important people are as we go through digital transformation, and also how important the focus on the customer is, this is clearly concerning, and I think something that we're going to have to work on in the near future. So Miles, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about some of the root causes and some of the reasons and some of the issues that are shaping the need for the CFO to collaborate, and then also maybe some of the barriers that they're experiencing here.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tony. I think it's such an important topic, right? And what we've seen over the course of the research is the increasing pace of change and disruption, and not least in the recent past as a result of the pandemic. But clearly the organizations that are navigating disruption successfully are going to be the ones that have leadership teams that are able to respond in an agile way. And so the relationships, the emotional intelligence that they're able to bring to solving some of these challenges is going to be a key defining factor for successful finance leaders. As we look back over the research and the most recent version, I think there's been some change in the weighting of the drivers of change that CFOs have been facing. So clearly what the research shows is there's a lot of impacts that CFOs are having to deal with and respond to, how their organizations are adapting. And as you see from the slide, most recently, clearly the accelerating pace of technology change, the increasing volumes of data are sort of preeminent in the minds of CFOs. I think we've seen a little bit of a tail off in some of the areas around regulatory change. We've come through a period of significant accounting standard change, which is waning a little bit. There was obviously the immediate aftermath of the financial crisis back when we first ran the survey. We're seeing some of those issues tailing away in significance, but I do think we'll see this increasing focus on technology being a consistent theme, including actually more recently a focus on ESG, or environmental, social and governance standards, that is really becoming a core area of focus for investors and the broader stakeholder community. So what I thought I would do actually, Tony, is then link that into the next topic, which is this issue about balancing long-term value, focus and short-term performance. Reassuringly, one of the key things that comes through in the research is that CFOs recognize that they are increasingly seen as the stakeholders and stewards of long-term value for their organizations. At the same time, there's clear recognition that the focus on short-term performance isn't going away, particularly as a result of activists, investors. And for most organizations, this balance between short-term and long-term remains a key focus. And I thought I would just share a little bit of perspective on what we mean by long-term value. Because I think there's a number of different ways it's defined. But if we think about the United Nations Sustainable Development definitions around principles of government, planet, people, and prosperity, there clearly is this wide range now and beyond the traditional financial measures of non-financial measures that organizations and stakeholders are using to measure corporate performance and progress against strategy. So as you see in the results, CFOs are very clearly saying they're no longer focused solely on delivering economic value, but increasingly this broader long-term value to all stakeholders, and that includes customers, communities, and beyond. There's very clear recognition that investors are increasingly requiring CFOs to provide much more information, and ultimately, we do expect that to be within the remit of the finance organization. Finance is very much the trusted party within the organization. Internal and external stakeholders look to finance to bring some of that impartial view, the control aspects that they expect, and so finance, I think, is going to be increasingly responsible for this broader array of metrics that need to be reported and the controls and the process that go into preparing that information consistently. And then finally, CFOs clearly recognise that there is significant value for their organisations that isn't measured or communicated using the traditional finance KPIs. And these areas around intangible value, such as innovation, brand value, the investment in people and talent is so important to be able to communicate effectively. Again, how as an organisation you are building the ability to drive profitability and growth into the future. So it's then interesting to look at, as CFOs fed back to us, where they saw the most significant risks being to growth and long-term value. And the number one area was cyber and cybersecurity risk, which, again, given the focus on digital and technology, perhaps isn't a surprise. But some of the areas that we associate with ESG and long-term value around environmental and climate change, the talent risk, some of the culture risk, perhaps score a little bit lower than we were expecting. But Tony, perhaps I'd ask you to comment on these results and your take on them.
Yeah, and clearly, I think, Miles, we saw that there is a very, very strong understanding of the importance of long-term value and the fact that we have to measure our results, not only in financial terms, but also in the impact to society and some of these other new and creative ways that we're thinking about value. But, it was a very interesting area, and you mentioned some of the risks and some of the barriers to long-term value. This is actually one of the areas of the study where we had a very interesting development where we saw a marked difference in the viewpoints when we looked at our data sort of on a generational basis, right? So the Gen X and the Boomer CFOs were very much focused on regulatory risk and some of the barriers presented by regulation and government oversight and those sorts of things. And we found this was interesting because when we talked to the millennial finance executives and CFOs, they in large part viewed cybersecurity and information privacy rules as one of the key risks. So we think there's a very interesting trend here. It's one that we don't fully understand yet. We're actually going to spend some more time exploring it, but it was clearly one of the areas in our study where we saw some key differences between the generations of finance executives. And on the one hand, maybe the older CFOs have some wisdom or some knowledge and experience that they've picked up on, or perhaps some of our younger CFOs who responded to this question are maybe seeing things in a different way. And certainly it's an argument for why it's good to have lots of different perspectives and a diverse set of viewpoints on a topic like this. So moving on then to the third theme that we wanted to mention here, there's a lot of impact on people and the human resources and the human capital of our organization. And all of this change and all of the technology and all of the great capabilities we have, at the end of the day, as we move to a digital future in our organizations, we can't really forget about the people agenda. And here we saw some interesting trends as well. And the last time we did this study, there was very much a focus on skills and upskilling the workforce. And while that's still important, and I think people realize that they have to have the right digital skills and the right technology skills, now we see kind of a new area being mentioned. We see our respondents talking about mindset and culture as being very important, right? With 71% of them mentioning that traditional behaviors and traditional mindsets are actually standing in the way of modern finance and the digital future. We also saw a lot of introspection and looking at the way finance and accounting is viewed by the rest of the organization as being too risk averse and very focused on cost. And ultimately, I think there's an acknowledgement from CFOs and finance executives that we have to think about culture within our organization. And especially with all the changes that are happening, we have to think about the impact it's having on our culture and then how we can future-proof that culture and make it more ready for all of the interesting and exciting things that are happening. And so, Miles, maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of the combination sort of the people and then the technology and how they're all sort of blending together as we move into the digital age, and then some of the observations we had there from a transformation perspective.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tony. And it's such an important point, right? And I think you hit on this sort of dichotomy between what CFOs are telling us in terms of the increasing strategic nature of the role, the aspirations they have to be better business partners, to be playing in this value creation space, versus how they felt their organisations were perceived, and this sort of risk aversion and cost focus is definitely an issue, potentially from what I call the brand of finance perspective, and are we going to be able to drive some of the the changes we want to see in terms of partnering, if the brand remains associated with those traditional values of finance. So I think it's such an important topic to deal with. And I think technology clearly has a role to play in accelerating some of that change. And I look at the way some of the clients that I work with are using data and analytics and visualization to help with storytelling and move away from some of the traditional analysis, the very dry analysis that finance was sometimes guilty of producing, and helping with the storytelling, particularly in terms of engaging with a marketing or a sales function, for example, where again you perhaps have people that don't have that financial background. So again, technology as an enabler, I think, is something we will continue to see accelerate. And I think the next theme I was going to pick up on is one of the changes I think we continue to see accelerating is some loosening in terms of the traditional boundaries of finance. I think finance has traditionally been seen as very much a walled garden, and we're seeing a lot more fluidity perhaps in how finance organizations are structured. So I think you see in the data this expectation around increasing use of cloud, which is definitely an accelerating trend. I think you see the willingness to partner beyond the four walls of the organization, and recognition that increasingly, for specialized areas of finance where there's a need for deep technical know-how, together potentially with investment in technology in areas like treasury and tax, recognition of business partnering in different ways is becoming increasingly prevalent, and other EY surveys we've done have continued to show that accelerating in terms of the pace of adoption. And then finally, I think we see areas like blockchain and some of the technology creating opportunities to again do for networks of organizations what ERP did for the individual enterprise. And again, we've got a great example working with Microsoft in terms of enabling the royalty payments on the Xbox platform as a great case study in how organizations can work together to drive efficiency, eliminate some of the the baseline transaction processing, and again focus on these higher value skills that I think all finance leaders aspire to focus their time on. So, Tony, anything else you wanted to cover on that topic?
No, I mean, I think it's interesting to see the impact that technology has had on all of our themes that we've identified in this study, and things like the Azure cloud platform and the way we operate now in teams, sort of in a seamless, everyday fashion, and even the way we use the Office products and the way we collaborate on documents has changed dramatically over the last several months. And so I think as challenging as these times have been, we clearly have some interesting trends with the acceleration of technology and sort of the ability to bring speed to value when we implement these different changes in our organizations. And I think all of that's only really accelerated here. So it's actually quite an interesting time, despite the many challenges that we face. So Miles, I'll let you kind of sum up. And then maybe I'll finish up with sort of one final thought from our study.
Yeah, so thanks, Tony. So again, just to recap, we've seen these three key themes coming out of the research, and again, this difficult balancing act that all CFOs face in three areas. This area of the complexity of environments they're operating in, and how best to navigate that through effective collaboration with peers. The need to enhance C-suite relationships, and the need to build some of the emotional intelligence alongside the traditional IQ. Again, bringing that agility and ability to respond to disruption in whatever form it continues. Again, this focus on short-term performance in line with long-term value creation, the need to balance the mandate between the traditional role of finance in protecting and optimizing value, now focusing more on value creation and growth. And again, this need to respond to the needs of multiple stakeholders internally and externally, and this need to think more broadly than just the traditional financial KPIs, and what are the systems and processes that are going to enable you to track and report some of these non-financial KPIs. And then finally, clearly, as we shift to an increasingly digital finance world, the culture and mindset that Tony talked about that we're going to need to instill in our finance organizations, that transformation is going to be key to the success of organizations. And how we recruit and train the right people, how we instill the attributes of teaming across organizations, and think of partnering more broadly beyond the four walls of our own organizations. I think these are kind of the attributes that we fully expect to see, leading finance organizations embracing and adopting over the next few years.
The final takeaways in from our CFO, DNA of the CFO study, one, we were actually quite, I think, happy to see that the finance executives and the leaders in these companies that we talked to, and it's a very global cross-section from across a lot of industries, they clearly understand the challenges that we're all facing. And I think we saw a great deal of vision and a great deal of sort of understanding of what it's going to take, right? The fact that we acknowledge the importance of long-term value, the importance of collaboration, the importance of mindset and culture. I think these were all very positive results. And despite the challenging environment we live in, I think probably the best answer we had, 76% of our respondents talked about the fact that despite the CFO role being incredibly challenging, there's never been a more exciting time to be a CFO. So I think people are very energized. They realize that we're in a time now moving from the computing age into the digital age, that we're going through some really incredible transformations despite all the challenges that the world has thrown at us over the last few months. And I think ultimately people are going to look back on it and realize that we all got to participate in something really special, really interesting, and really exciting. And so we found it actually pretty motivating to see that the CFOs and the finance executives we talked to have picked up on this and are actually quite excited to be in their roles. So Miles, I'll let you close and maybe just say a few words about some of the different things that people can do if they want to follow up on these topics and dive down a little deeper into some of the things we've talked about.
Great. Well, thanks, Tony. And definitely a bright note to finish on. And hopefully the role continues to be aspirational and we can work to create the next generation of finance leaders. Thanks to all of you for joining today. If you are interested in diving deeper into any of the the data and the underlying research, we've shared the links where you can access this. We've just touched on a few of the key themes today. There's a lot more data that underpins the research and some visualizations that we've done that also, I think, bring out some of the comparisons between the peer groups that Tony mentioned as well. So hopefully the conversation has sparked some ideas and maybe even a few questions around the finance agenda and the changing role of the CFO. And we'd invite you to join us following this Keynote for the live Q&A session. Tony and I'll be standing by to answer your questions and to hopefully continue the conversation.
Thank you, Miles and Tony. The information found in your DNA of the CFO survey is so insightful, and I definitely recommend folks access the full study. One statistic really stood out to me. At one point during your session, you showed a data point that 84% of finance leaders in large organizations say that they are overseeing efforts to adopt technology like AI to transform. That's often easier said than done, and tangible examples can often be helpful. With that in mind, we'll next be joined by Rohit Amberkar, who is going to show how his team from Microsoft's finance operations is leveraging AI-driven SOX control automation.
Hi. My name is Rohit Amberkar. I'm a finance director in finance operations. And we look at the operations that is required to support the finance function. What we will talk today is about how we have leveraged artificial intelligence to automate one of our processes. We will talk about automating a key SOX control using artificial intelligence within our royalties processes. So without further delay, let's just jump into the presentation today. So here is a problem landscape. The royalties team is responsible for processing payment of royalties for all the intellectual properties Microsoft licenses from third-party vendors, suppliers, companies. So annually, we process about 30,000 statements. And traditionally, these statements are very high-value statements, some very low-value statements, and these are manually reviewed because we have a SOX control that requires us to review these statements and then approve these statements before payments are released. So we spend an inordinate amount of time in reviewing these statements because, and as you can imagine, these statements require a lot of human oversight to make sure that we don't make inaccurate payments. As with any process, we do have some error here, and every time there is an error or every time there is some kind of reconciliation problem, we delay processing these statements, which results in other problems like penalties and other things. So overall, it's a very inefficient process that we used to have. If you look at the current process, what it looks like, as with any, and this what you see here on the screen is the real workflow of how we used to process and approve and review the statements. Anywhere between 5 to 10 layers of reviews were performed on these statements, primarily because every mistake created a new control. There were about 10 different decision points and about 20 control points along the way of approving the statement, reviewing the statement, and every mistake created a new checkpoint. And you can imagine over the last 15, 20 years, the review function got complex and complex. So we looked at this and we said, okay, how can we use technology to augment the human process here of approving and reviewing the statement? What we did was we looked at different options that we have in reimagining this review and approve function. So what did we reimagine? We said, look, whatever we are looking at in terms of reviewing the statement, it can fall within 3 or 4 different checks that humans can perform. Number one is people apply heuristics based on their prior understanding, judgment, and their expectations. They look at a statement and they verify if the numbers and the transactions and the details on the statement meet their expectations. The second, generally people apply, new people, is they're given a checklist, some kind of a checklist, or the SOX control also defines what a pass scenario looks like and what a fail scenario looks like for any statement. And based on that checklist, people perform review function. And the last one is some kind of a human intuition. Something just doesn't look right. Either it's based on the trending or based on any other conditions people may have that just doesn't look right for people. So we said, look, of all the different ways in which people review this statement, we can think about certain statements that generally work or generally go through something what we call as a happy path. A happy path is low volatility, the thresholds are very low, and the control works as designed. Take, for example, a fixed fee payment that for the next 12 months, you will pay exactly the same amount because your subscription for this intellectual property is based off of a fixed fee contract. What can go wrong, right? It's very easy to look at different periods of payments and just look at, does it meet the requirement and does it meet the expectation? So that's precisely what we captured, and we said, let's capture those simple rules, simple heuristics, simple trends that you can take away. Instead of people working like robots, just doing the same thing over and over again, can we actually get robots and machine and artificial intelligence to perform and augment the human effort? So we focused on what you see on the screen here. A red scenario is where something doesn't look right, and yellow scenario is something appears for the first time. So we did define a set of controls, set of rules, set of trends that we expect to see, and then we deployed artificial intelligence, machine learning to review every statement. And those statements that are below certain thresholds, we called it a happy path, and we said, can we tag them as green if they all pass the test? From an audit perspective, just saying that something is green is not adequate. You have to be able to say why something is green. And one of the screenshot on the bottom right-hand corner you see there is the proof that why something is indeed a green. And this proof is given to the approver to be able to say, for whatever reason, if this proof is not adequate, they can override this tagging that the artificial intelligence has performed. So based on this framework, we deployed machine learning and artificial intelligence using Microsoft's own AI stack. And then we ran every statement below a certain threshold. And again, we talk about happy path to see that if the statements can go through the happy path. And what you see on the screen is how our statement portal looks like. This is a portal where approvers, reviewers come to look at the statements and release these statements for our partners' consumptions. Upon release of these statements is when the payment happens. So this is a check before the release of the payment. So on the second column where you see anomaly, that is exactly where the AI is augmenting the human intuition, human judgment. Every time you see a green, it tells you that the artificial intelligence, the machine learning has tagged that statement to be extremely low risk and passing all the rule-based and trending-based controls that we look for. Now we have an option here, right? We completely make this touchless and we can release it for payment. And we reviewed these statements, continuously reviewed these statements just to look at if this artificial intelligence is indeed doing what it's supposed to do for 6 months. And after 6 months, our confidence was very high. And then we completely made, upon certain thresholds, definition of certain thresholds, we made these statements completely touchless. And every time you see a red, those statements require an additional layer of human review. So the overall benefit of doing this, as you can see on the next slide, is we have reduced about 70% of the manual hours as a result of this automation. 100% of the statement earlier, these statements were sample tested. Now every statement goes through a very rigorous testing. And those statements that don't pass through the judgment of AI goes through the human review, and that clearly gives a reason why something is red. So thereby, the risk of inaccurate payments is substantially reduced. So what we have seen here, you can see here, 99.9% of all the known errors are all eliminated as a result of this. So we are seeing a lot of benefits overall. If you look at one segment of the business, about 90% of the statements today for one segment of the business today goes through this automated path, or the happy path as we call it, completely touchless, and it has saved a lot of hours as a result of this automation. The beauty of this automation is just that we have tested this and only in the statement, but if you look at this framework of using artificial intelligence to augment the human judgment for anything that requires either a rule-based testing or some kind of a trending-based testing. Let's talk about PO approval. Let's talk about expense approval. Let's talk about journal entry approval. The same framework that we reviewed today can be applied in very many different finance processes, and we have just started scratching the surface. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and it inspired you to reimagine your own processes in a way to not only increase your efficiency, but substantially reduce your risk. Thanks a lot for your time today.
Rohit, thank you as always for sharing this with us. A 70% reduction in human hours to manage statement validation is an incredible outcome. It's even more compelling as it frees up these individuals to focus on high-value work and long-term impact. If you enjoyed seeing a practical example of using technology to transform finance, please check out similar content in the on-demand resources and visit us at aka.ms/Modern Finance Hub. This is also a great segue into our next session, as it's a good example of both addressing near-term needs and showing how finance processes can be transformed for greater efficiency and impact. We're now joined by Jim Barris, who will talk about the modern finance workplace.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Jim Barris, and I am a director within the Finance Transformation Group at PwC. I'm here to talk to you today about Finance Reimagined and enabling the new normal within the finance modern workplace. So let's go ahead and get started. Over the next 20 minutes, we've got 4 items we want to cover as part of our agenda. That first item being emerging finance trends, and then taking a look at digital transformation and how that impacts a return to growth, looking at workforce performance and experience, and then lastly, looking at some lessons learned from working remotely in finance. Taking a look at emerging finance trends, in the beginning of March of this year, PwC has been conducting a monthly pulse survey, starting with initially CFOs and then expanding to all of the C-suite. At the bottom of this slide, you will see the 2021 priorities that we are hearing from CFOs and from other finance leaders. Many of these topics are addressed through various parts of the Finance Reimagined Summit, but I'd like to take some time to talk about what these mean for finance. At the core, the fundamentals of finance are more or less the same. We're really talking about processing transactions efficiently, reporting numbers and closing the books, and then also how finance can be a business partner. How you get there and what you can do as a finance function has changed drastically and will continue to evolve. If you look at a lot of the key influencers and emerging trends, robotics and AI continue to be a key topic of conversation. Finance is looking to drive more insights through analytics, and also trying to leverage the cloud for either point solutions or complete transformations of the ERP and of the GL. And ultimately, how do you bring the workforce along in this journey? In addition to large platform investments, CFOs are looking at individual applications that can help the finance function operate more efficiently and apply AI and analytics capabilities. The role of finance is changing from just closing the books and providing numbers to adding value back and providing true insights to their business stakeholders. Leveraging AI to make forecasting a more touchless activity, which is something you will hear more about in the next Keynote session. And in doing so, companies are looking at more than just their own internal data, but also looking at how they can leverage external data and benchmarking to better inform their forecasts. Applying both structured and unstructured data in the finance space is providing a lot of new opportunities, such as using this data to identify risk areas proactively. There is a proactive risk analytics and command on-demand session on this topic that I would highly recommend you watching if you are interested in hearing more. Continuous close has always been a topic within finance, but we are getting closer and closer to a non-event close, where rather than having a multi-day or even multi-week long close process, technology can help to create topside entries, adjustments, and accruals, with the close becoming a smaller review and adjustment, freeing up the time of your people to focus on those more value-added activities and providing insights to the business, rather than trying to force their way through a highly manual close process. And additionally, the workforce. The finance workforce is becoming more tech savvy, and the remote workforce is becoming more and more prevalent. Citizen-led campaigns are becoming more common, and be sure to check out the Powering Your Finance Modernization through Citizen-Led Data Analytics and Upskilling on-demand session to learn more about this topic. So let's take a look at where investments are driving a return to growth. In talking through the emerging finance trends on the previous slide, we covered a lot of ways that technology is impacting the finance function, but where are businesses investing in 2021? As part of our November Pulse survey, we asked the question, to what extent is your business changing resource allocations in the following areas in 2021? The results should not be too surprising that the number one area that is seeing an increase in allocations is digital transformation. Now, digital transformation can mean a lot of things, and while the third theme in this event is Reimagine, Transform for the Future, you will see the impacts of digital transformation across both the respond and the recover themes as well. Digital transformation is what has allowed businesses to respond to the ongoing crises and also help them recover as we reimagine what the new normal is. So let's talk a bit about digital transformation and how it is fueling growth and insights. When we say digital transformation, what do we actually mean? Or more importantly, what are the digital transformation initiatives that CFOs are investing in? In our October Pulse survey, we asked the question, which of the following digital transformation initiatives is your firm investing in to accelerate revenue growth over the next 12 months? Overwhelmingly, optimizing the approach to data analytics and leveraging automation technologies were at the top of the list, with a second tier of responses around moving applications and data to the cloud, reimagining the customer experience, and transforming product and service development and delivery. These are all topics that we have either heard about in other portions of this Keynote presentation or topics that will be covered in different on-demand sessions. But the thing that I'd like to call to your attention is that only 21% of all leaders and 16% of CFOs identified rolling out digital upskilling to our workforce as one of the digital transformation efforts they are investing in over the next 12 months. Now, this piques my interest for two reasons. First off, the workforce is a key driver to successful digital transformation. Applying data analytics or purchasing automation technologies has a lower likelihood of success if you don't have a workforce that has been involved in determining not only where the technology should be applied, but also has been upskilled and has the right knowledge to leverage these new technologies. Secondly, how teams innovate and collaborate has become a more pressing question with the pandemic transforming our ways of working. Companies that broke down silos during the pandemic with new collaboration tools and workforce models should consider how to retain the hard-won agility during the transition back to the workplace and in the post-pandemic economy. Additionally, you are going to end up in a situation where you have some people who are back in person while others remain remote. And this mix of in-person versus remote workforce is going to change from day to day or week to week. And understanding how you can effectively work in this type of environment is going to be key for success. So let's talk a little bit about workforce performance and the experience in the workplace. Between the impacts of a global pandemic and the changes that are driven by digital transformation, finance leaders must continue to deliver results and identify new opportunities while also answering a deeper and more fundamental question for their people of, how can you help me thrive? In answering this question, there are 6 different areas that we look at across the employee experience that drives workforce performance. First off, collaboration. How do you continue to collaborate with teams that are going to become a mix of in-office and remote, with the potential for this mix to vary from day to day? It's one thing to drive collaboration when everyone is remote, but the dynamics are going to change as it becomes a mix with some people in office and others remote. And ensuring that you can successfully collaborate in this mixed environment is going to be key. If we think about communication, the truth is that everyone is having their own challenges and struggles each and every day. But clear and transparent communication, with recognitions of the events going on in the world, will help employees not only stay engaged, but also feel more understood. This type of communication also helps to build community. In the early days of the pandemic, everyone was overloaded with virtual connectivity events. There were things going on every day and every night. But the sense of community also ties directly to a sense of belonging and building better relationships with people at all levels of an organization. This also becomes very important as some people start to transition to being back in office while others continue to work remotely. Don't forget about those people who may not be standing around the water cooler in the coming months. When we think about creation, we've heard about the upskilling of people, and we'll hear more in later sessions about citizen-led modernization efforts. But how do you give people the opportunity to get creative and explore new and dynamic approaches to their work? Giving people this flexibility will keep them engaged and keep them excited about how they can leverage new technologies and change the way that they work. I'd also like to talk about coaching. There are a lot of managers who are very successful in an in-person model where they're able to check in on and work closely with their people. But the ability to successfully manage, coach, and motivate people changes in a virtual or hybrid in-person and remote working model. And also commitment. You need to focus on the actions you are taking and proving to your people that you are committed to them, their health, their well-being, and their upskilling and career growth. And lastly, think about how all of this ties to both rewards and recognition. The things that people truly care about have shifted over the past 9 months. High performers can continue to be rewarded in monetary ways, but there are also non-monetary ways that people can feel rewarded and feel recognized for the great things that they're doing. Now, I'd like to pivot the conversation a little bit to discuss how technology can be applied across the areas that we've already been talking about, and specifically how you can drive experience with Microsoft technology. There are multiple demos and on-demand sessions that will go deeper into these topics, but a few of the ways that we are leveraging Microsoft technologies in the finance space include the 4 focus areas that we're showing on the screen. So let's talk a little bit about what these mean. Finance intelligence, finance automation, connected finance workplace, and the finance ERP in a box. These are the different ways we think about how people can know or build functional and persona-based analytical dashboards, reports, and insights, how they can act, rapidly prototyping and deploying process use cases for business-driven transformation, how they can share or build persona-based collaboration, productivity, and workplace platforms to share automations across business functions, and ultimately how you can capture or connect your enterprise platforms to help rapidly deploy new models based on citizen insights. Across these 4 areas, we leverage different Microsoft technologies to really change the way that people work, driving digital transformation across various different areas of the finance function. I want to close with a quick summary of 4 lessons that we as PwC have learned for working remotely in finance. Setting up for short-term virtual work is one thing. Having a virtual work operation that allows you to consistently deliver quality experiences for not only your customers, but also your employers is another story altogether. The first lesson is that technology isn't a one and done effort. Tech is key to helping enable remote work, but it's not enough to roll out new tools and applications. Secondly, empowered and upskilled people are the key. In order to conduct virtual business effectively, you need a workforce that is up to the task. You can invest as much as you want in digital transformation, but you really need people who have developed a digital mindset where they are ready for what's next and willing and eager to try new things. Third, communication is about much more than video chats. In order to make up for a lack of in-person contact, it's critical to prioritize communication and collaboration in a virtual work environment. And that requires more than just having a video meeting here and there. It's about establishing transparency and connection when you can't be face-to-face. And just because some people are going to be back on site doesn't mean that you can forget about those people who are still remote. And last, it's important to revisit controls and account for a virtual close. I would be remiss to not acknowledge that your company's control environment likely changed over the course of the past 10 months, including the move to remote work and process flows, along with the changes to business conditions and work volume. It's critical to take the time to evaluate internal controls as you move to a hybrid model that combines both remote and on-site work. On that note, I would like to thank you for your time, and I do hope that you are as excited as I am for the remainder of not only this Keynote session, but also for the on-demand materials that will be available as part of Finance Reimagined. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. The lessons you shared about working remotely definitely resonate, and it will be fascinating to see how we all continue to incorporate those across virtual, hybrid, and even in-office workspaces going forward. I also found your emphasis on where CFOs are prioritizing digital investments into both analytics and automation enlightening. We'll be closing with an example of cash flow forecasting, but before we do so, I wanted to give a quick reminder. All of the sessions you've seen today will be made available on demand, and you can always revisit them. A number of additional sessions, which deep dive into several key topics, are also being made available shortly after we're done. Don't forget to take a look. Now let's hand it over to Shivam Pandey, who will talk about how AI is being infused into the cash flow forecasting process and what this means for our organizations.
My name is Shivam Pandey, and I'm a product manager on the Dynamics 365 finance team. In this session, I will show you how to use customer payment prediction functionality and intelligent cash flow functionality to make your collections process more predictive and proactive and improve the accuracy of your cash flows. Let's look at the customer payment prediction functionality first. Organizations often find it challenging to predict when customers will pay their invoices. This lack of insight leads to less accurate cash flow forecasts, collection processes that are started too late. Customer payment predictions uses machine learning to enable organizations to predict when the invoices will be paid and helps the organization to create collection strategies that improve the probability of being paid on time. Payment predictions can then be used to create cash flow forecasts, thus accounting for the customer's payment behavior and making cash flow more accurate. Let's take a quick tour. When you think about AI solutions, you may be thinking about complexity of deployment, consumption, and extension of the AI solutions. We make it easy to deploy, consume, and extend AI solutions in Dynamics 365 Finance. Let's see this in action with customer payment prediction. Customer payment prediction functionality predicts the probability of payment in 3 buckets: on time, late, or very late. On the setup screen, you can define what late bucket means for your organization. In this case, we will define the late bucket to be 30 days from the due date. Any prediction beyond the 30 days from the due date will fall in the very late bucket. Once you have set the bucket definition, an end user can click the Generate Prediction Model button to start the deployment of the AI model, to train the AI model on your organization's data, and the predictions will start flowing back automatically. Once the AI model has been deployed, you will see an accuracy score for that model. Now the predictions are available on the forms a collections persona is familiar with, like the collections workspace. On the collections workspace, you will see 2 new tiles: customers predicted to be paid late. This tile is a list of all customers who have more than 50% of their open balance predicted to be paid late or very late. Transactions predicted to be paid late is a list of all transactions that have the payment probability of being paid late or very late above 50%. Let's look at transactions predicted to be paid late list page. On this list page, you will see payment predictions for each open customer transaction. For the first invoice, the probability of payment on time is only 27%. On the right, you can see the detailed payment prediction in 3 buckets: on time, late, and very late. In this case, the chance of getting paid late and very late is very high, 40% and 33% respectively. In addition to the prediction, we provide you the factors that played an important role in predicting this invoice will be paid late. In this case, the amount, location, and payment method are the most important factors that predicted that this invoice for this customer might be paid late or very late. We also provide information about the current state of the customer with you. For example, their late payment amount, their last payment date, etc. We also provide historical payment information going back up to an year. All this contextual information helps you build confidence in the prediction that we're providing you and enables you to use these predictions in proactively managing collections. Now, every business is different. If you are not happy with the result with the out-of-box payment prediction AI model, you can easily customize it in the Power User Experience and make it fit your needs. You can click on this Improve Accuracy button to land into an AI Builder experience where you can select from a set of fields the most relevant fields for your business in predicting when these invoices will be paid. For example, if discount percentage was not an important factor, while the payment schedule was, you can select payment schedule and retrain this model and publish this model, and the predictions will automatically start using the new model and flow into Dynamics 365 Finance. You are an expert, you know your business well, no developer support needed. Customer payment predictions will make collections focused and proactive. Accounting for customers' payment behavior in cash flow will make cash flow more accurate. The next feature I want to talk about is the intelligent cash flow forecasts. Cash flow forecast is very important for every business. If a business runs out of cash, it will become insolvent. Even if a company is profitable, if you do not have good cash flow to meet immediate needs, you can still find yourself in trouble and insolvency. Hence, it is imperative that companies keep their cash flow in order and manage cash effectively. For most companies today, managing cash flow and running cash flow forecasts is tedious, repetitive, and a manual process. Most companies rely on Excel-centered solutions of varying degree of complexity. Some of the challenges with cash flow forecasting are, one, data is in silos. Some of the data that you require for cash flow forecasting might reside in ERP, some might reside in the treasury management system, while other might reside in your capital management system. You need to bring all this data into one place to create a cash flow forecast. Second, cash flow forecast is generally rudimentary and based on your business. And lastly, it is tedious to measure the accuracy of your cash flow forecast once finance have been realized. As hard it is to go create a cash flow forecast, it is harder to extract the data from your financial systems and lay it on top of the cash flow forecast and figure out those variances. We have tried to solve all these three problems with the solution that we are shipping. Like I said, to solve all these problems that we talked about, we have created a new cash flow hub in Dynamics 365 Finance. The external data functionality on the hub makes it easy to integrate cash flow data from external systems into finance using data import-export framework and allowing easy integration with Excel OData. We enable users to add multiple different sources of data to create a comprehensive cash flow solution. The cash position functionality makes near-term cash flow forecast intelligent. The cash position is created based on customers' payment behavior to predict when can we expect cash to arrive in their accounts. We also use analysis of your behavior and how you pay your vendors to predict when invoices will be paid by you to your vendors. The cash flow forecasting functionality makes long-term cash flow forecast intelligent. Utilizing time series forecasting through automated integration with AI Builder, it finds trends in your historical bank balances and projects future bank balances. The snapshot functionality can be used to save cash position and cash forecast for editing. The system generated snapshots and forecasts that we have created. The snapshot functionality allows you to do what-if analysis by creating multiple snapshots, say for realistic cash flow, pessimistic cash flow, and optimistic cash flow, and then comparing the variances. Once you have saved the cash flow forecasts, you can also go back later and compare your cash flow forecast with actuals. So suppose a couple of weeks have passed since you've created your cash flow forecast and snapshots. And now you want to see how you did against those forecasts. You can just click Compare with Actuals button to load the comparison and see the variances right in this view. Some of the other capabilities provided are the ability to view cash flow forecasts in multiple currencies, across legal entities, ability to filter down and view cash flow related to bank accounts and specific financial dimensions. The intelligent cash flow forecast functionality in Dynamics 365 Finance will empower your organizations to transform tedious, repetitive, and complex cash flow forecast creation to automated and simplified process, taking into account payment behavior and forecasting based on historical trends, enabling you to focus on critical decision-making to drive desired business outcomes. The customer payment prediction functionality and the cash flow functionality are currently in private preview. If you want to participate in private preview, please email us on the address listed on the slide. The functionality will be publicly available in April 2021 as part of our public preview program, and the GA is in October 2021. Hope you found this session useful.
Thank you, Shivam, and all of our speakers for these amazing insights and examples. We hope all of you who have joined us today have learned something of value and would love your feedback on how we can improve this event and what you'd like to hear more about. Don't forget that you can listen to all of this and more on demand, and we wish you the best of luck as you continue to respond, recover, and reimagine the future of finance. Now, please join us as we go to a live Q&A.